we lived in Southeast San Diego when my boys were 5 and 7. And this is about 35 years ago or so. They still have friends from that neighborhood. So we melted in and became part of the neighborhood. And it's a puzzlement to me why there's not more of that integration on both sides.
So, Bob opened up this can of worms, and I'm fine with it because it's a can of worms that is often
Needs to be open. Yeah.
is often discussed, but it's not typically a focal point. I want to let you know this is our 122nd event, and we've had many events where we don't discuss race. Maybe it's because people don't feel comfortable talking about it, to Bob's point, or it's just not something that came up in that particular Game Changer event. But when Larry, you talk about, you don't understand why there's not more integration. We often hear Black police officers use the phrase white flight. Whenever they use that phrase, I always ask them to explain what they mean. And what white flight is when people of color started moving into various communities that were predominantly inhabited by white citizens. Those white homeowners or white renters left. They didn't want to live with those folks that were moving in. So I've never had an opportunity to ask anyone why that phenomenon takes place, but there seems to be a lack of desire for different ethnic groups. They want to stay amongst themselves. They don't want to live with other people. I want to ask you all this. When you walk into a supermarket, a typical supermarket that I walk into, 98% of the people in the supermarket are white. And as a person who isn't white, I always notice that. Do any of you ever notice that? You go into a restaurant and it's predominantly one skin color of person in the restaurant or in the supermarket. The reason why that has to do with what took place in this country long before any of us were born. And we're still living in that America, right? That's just the truth of the matter. So when we talk about law enforcement and we talk about communities, most of law enforcement around the country, about 70% of law enforcement is comprised of white males. You might ask why that's the case. Well, for the longest time, law enforcement, if you wanted to work in law enforcement, you had to be a white male to work in that profession. No other demographic could have that job. And that was the case for well over 100 years. So that was the roots of law enforcement. And now we live in a time and we live in a country where you can be any skin color and any gender, and you can be a member of law enforcement. But that wasn't always the case. So that's part of the history of law enforcement.